Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, what we're gonna actually cover is modeling a complete game asset from start to finish. We're not gonna focus on texturing or UV unwrapping or baking. We'll actually cover that in a later video. Today, what I wanted to go over was how to pretty much go from your visual memory to paper, or essentially viewport. But first, I really want to give a big shout out and a thank you to each one of you who have given me so much support through the entire process of creating this channel. I hope to continue to provide you the same value and help you out in your future as well with your projects or anything that you're going towards. And you'll be able to use these same exact fundamental steps to cover any of your projects. And these are the same exact theory that I go over whenever I create these big scenes. By the end of the video, we'll have something like this created. This is the security camera that we're going to be working on. I'll show you step by step every method that I'll be using to model all the parts, the functionality, keeping your scene organized, and how to separate between high poly and low poly, and a few of the steps that I take to go about doing that. So I really hope you enjoy this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, and Blender. Now let's add in a cube. Now, if you did want to follow along, let's turn on our edge length. Perfect. Now, just eyeballing it. Normally we go by exact dimensions, but we're going kind of quick. So let's go scale by the Y. All right. So now these are the measurements that I got. Let's go ahead and scale it by the Z. And scale this by the X. Okay, those are our measurements. You need to see right here. Perfect. Now, what we're gonna do, we're gonna select our outer edges and bevel. Now let's see how much of a bevel we want. I might just do a little bit more by 8 segments. Okay, got it right, just where we want it. Perfect. Now, remember, security cameras typically have this outer shell. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create that shell. How do we do that? Real simple. Select this face, hold Control, and select this face. And what it does is automatically goes through and selects all of it. Now, we don't need the edge length anymore, so we're gonna take that off for now. Shift D to duplicate, P for selection on its own. Perfect. Now, select all of those edges, or all those faces, hold Alt S. And just a tad bit, what we're doing is basically scaling it out. So displacing it from the original mesh, just to kind of give it a little more detail. Now, select all the faces, and as before, extrude along normals. Just a small amount. Now, we're at 0.0249 meters on the offset, or the extrusion. Now, offset even, make sure you keep that. Shell does not cover the entire camera most of the time. So what can we do? We can actually create another loop right here and another loop right here. Why? I'll show you no reason in just a second. We're gonna select these, pull them back. I'm gonna take all these and pull them forward. Then we can take the bottom edges and lift those up a bit. Boom. And we got ourselves the shell on the outside. If you need to bring back these vertices, you can. Remember, think about functionality. All we're really doing with this cover is to kind of block. All right, now that we got the base camera and the shell going, now what we're gonna do next is we're gonna create the hinge point. So mechanically, how is this going to work? How is it going to hinge up and down? Is it going to just be pretty much going in one axis? It's up to you. It's all up to you how you create. So how I'm going to be creating is just create an interest point right here. So Shift S, cursor to selected. So everything that you're trying to create is going to again start right here. All right, we're going to add in a cylinder. 32 faces is good. Radius 0.42 meters, depth 0.16 meters. All right, that'll work. Now let's turn on our snapping. Face project. Drop this down, lift it back up, and snap it to the point. Most of the time, our hinge point is going to be a little bit further back from the middle, just because it needs to be able to rotate it up and down. Again, this will go up against what kind of design you are going with. So if you're just going with one axis, it'll probably be more in the middle. So for this one, we're going with this. Now, what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to actually delete this face and this face. Select these edges, and I'm going to turn off snapping, bring these edges down. All right. Now I'm going to look at it from the bottom, go into vertice mode. I'm going to select these vertices and these vertices. Perfect. Now, what I'm going to do next, turn on proportional editing and bring them down and raise my area of effect with the page up and down buttons. Once you get a good effect that you like, we're going to go with that. So as you can see, you notice that this is messed up. No problem. We can fix that. Select all of those outer edges, scale them by the Z-axis to 0 degrees. Turn on your snapping, lift it, make it touch the surface. Now, obviously this is just a little bit too much, so we're gonna lower this down. All right, now that we have our shape, let's actually lower this down just a bit. Turn off proportional editing. All right. Doing a loop cut right here. Control bevel. Let's grab this edge, scale it by the 0 degree. Up it to about right here. And throw about 2 more edges. All right, now that we have this set up, what we can actually do is select these faces and these faces, Shift D, right click, P, and selection. All right, so now what we can do with these guys, circle and unflatten it and make it just a little bit smaller. All right, perfect. All right, bring it through. Combine them. So select this face and this set of faces and Control J. Now, select this, link with L. Snap it into that area. All right. Select this element, link it, go to face, intersect Boolean. Awesome. Now we just got to clean up a little bit. So how do we do that? Select this M at last. M at last. Connect these two. All right, once you go through and you connect everything together and have quads, so we have all quads on every face, what we can do next is just make sure that you don't have any overlapping vertices or anything like that. So you'll notice shading issues. That means that there's probably an overlapping vertice like so. And if you need to maneuver it just a bit, you can. Just move it to the sides, keep all the angles pretty even. We got ourselves the cutouts. Now, what you can do is you can actually make them smaller. You can keep them the same size. It's up to you. Or we also need to think about affecting both sides. Select those faces, delete them. Select these edges and these edges. Hold Shift S, cursor to selected. Object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. Then we're going to mirror it. All right, and we're going to turn on clipping. Now we got both sides even, everything looks right. From From here, you can even choose to turn in the solidifier modifier. So if we go in and we find our solidifier, mess around with it and see what kind of effects we get. Turn on even thickness. .02 from about 0.03 for me would be a good amount. Now I have my hinge point created. I might actually go in and select these circles, just the one, just scale it down a bit. Might just be a little bit too big. Make sure you snap it to the surfaces so you get the right shading after scaling, because typically when you scale it, it's going to scale it back down. So you can just bring it back forward and snap it to the closest vertice. And apply your mirror, apply your solidifier modifier, and you'll notice that you have all perfect even topology. So from here, you can actually create the ball point. So what I mean by that is select these outer edges, Shift D, duplicate, P, selection as before. Select all the edges and fill them. Select the new created face, scale it down a bit. All right, now let's bring it down. Perfect. Take the mesh and flip the normals at this point. Select all the outer edges, press E, and scale it down. Or not scale it, extrude it down, excuse me. Now, we have our second point created. So the reason why we did this, obviously, is to create the point where it's going to be rotating back and forth. Now, typically, what you can do is set your origin to the geometry. Make it just a tad bit smaller. Raise it up or raise it down, whatever you need to do. Now, what you can do is you can actually go into this element that you've created, select these faces, hold Shift S, cursor to selected. Now select these guys right here, along with the new created hinge. You don't need to create that, use that one. Go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. Now what you can do is actually rotate on our new hinge point. So you can see it in effect and how it works. So it actually has its own blockages of how much it can rotate back and forth. It goes perfect with functionality and it works. Now, typically I would say go ahead and start rotating this out, but for right now, we're just going to keep it as straight and then we're going to rotate it later. So to be able to create the supports, let's just lower this down a bit more. Now, what I'm going to do is going to just throw in a loop cut right here. Now, select these outer edges, lower it down, control bevel, and select those faces and extrude along normals. Then select the inner edges and scale them along the Z-axis. Now, I'm actually going to throw in a loop cut right here. I'm going to select these outer faces and I'm going to extrude along normals. And it's going to be really up to you how much you extrude them by, if you want to make them larger, smaller. Just remember that it's got to fit onto the actual platform. So mine, I'm going to set it at 0.12, and I think that's a good amount for me. Now it's up to you how you want it to pretty much be sitting on a support and what kind of support that you want. For me, I'm going to go with a cube. Shift S, cursor to selected, add cube. Once I have my cube, I scaled it down and use snapping to snap it to the surface in the correct manner. Now, I'm gonna move it back right here. Now it's gonna be up to you how you wanna set up the support. What I'm gonna do is actually scale it on the X-axis and lift. So you can actually take this end face, Shift D to duplicate, P by selection. P by selection. All right. Object, set origin to geometry. S by Z, S by X. And that's how we attach it to the wall. So you can select those outer edges. You can extrude them by Y, and then select these just for interest designs. Control bevel by 1 segment. So from here, you can add screws, bolts, anything that you can think of. And if you wanted to just add more design purposes, so let's say you would take this, take these outer edges, and we bevel them. All right, continuing on. So now we got ourselves our camera, we got ourselves the cover, pivoter. We got our support and where we're gonna attach it to the wall. Next, we're gonna start working on some smaller details. A few other things we can do on the camera itself. So we want to create some kind of like paneling effect, as I would call it. So best ways to do that is we can actually inset this guy just one time. Let's see, about right there. Go to set edge rail. Awesome. Now let's inset it one more time. 0.02. All right. Now what you can do, select these edges right here. Control bevel them. Control B. When I say control bevel, it's always control B. It's just the way that I think about it. So yeah. Anyways, select those faces and extrude along normals and set them back. And it creates a little bit of more interest in your geometry. All right, so continuing forward, what I can actually do, extrude this back, and then inset, and then scale it down. And at this point, what we're wanting is pretty much the lens where we're going to be recording from. So it'll be up to you how big you want it to be. Look at references if you want to, just to get a clear idea of how it's set up. For me, what I might do is actually take these guys and scale them out a bit more, about right there. You can choose to lift it, lower it, whatever you want to do. I might keep it just right there. All right, now let's extrude that because we want to be able to create the effect. Ultimately, what we're going to do is put a face right around the borders of here, which is going to be the glass. And we can create the lens effect kind of on the underneath. All right, let's keep going. Next, what I really want to do is select these outer edges, bevel them one time. See what kind of effect that we get into it. It's more interesting. All right, so now what we want to do is go ahead and separate the front face from the back end pretty much. Select all of those. Go ahead and select the back end as well for right now. And then grow our selection with Control plus. And P by selection. Loop cut one right there. And one right there. Let's go into X-ray mode. Select all of those loops as well. Let's lower these guys right there. All right, with that being done, Control B for bevel. Right about there. Yeah. All right, so what we're gonna also do now is throw in a loop right here in the middle. We're gonna go in, select this face, and this face. And we're gonna go ahead and delete it. So we can actually go in, inset this guy, by 0.02. This is a really good reason why you keep remembering all your measurements and go precise. It really helps. Delete this face, select this edge, and let's select this edge and bridge edge loops. Select this and this, bridge, and the same thing here, bridge. And we got a little bit of extra detail. It's up to you how you want to create it. If you want to make more of them, you can. If you want to make it a bit wider, you can. It's all up to you. Now what I'm actually going to do is hide this by itself. I'm going to actually throw in a loop right here and right there. I'm going to go in to this back face. Select these outer vertices. Connect them. All right. Now we're going to select these faces in X-ray mode and delete them. Reason why is we're going to just mirror this. Select all the outer edge loops, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then object set origin, origin to 3D cursor. Now we're going to apply a mirror modifier. Now both sides have that same exact detail. You can choose to go ahead and apply it, or you can keep it. I'll just keep it for right now. All right, one thing you can do right here. So I had already added these loop cuts ahead of time. So let's just dissolve those for right now. Let's just start from the beginning. Throw a loop cut in the middle. Select it, Control B for bevel. And let's get about right there. All right, now select these faces, inset them, tiny bit. Mess around with your settings just to see what you get. And now let's go into loop cuts and turn it into a circle and then scale it. Now that we have a circle out of it, now we can extrude along our normals and create our little blinking red light over here if we want to. Okay, so now let's go back into our transformation orientations. Go back to global. Shift S, cursor to selected. Add a cylinder. Let's do about 24 vertices. Lower down the radius and rotate by 90. Nope. Rotate 90 on the x-axis. Let's increase the radius by how much? Let's see. There we go. Decrease depth. Radius. So currently I got 24 vertices, 0.37 meters on depth and radius. Perfect. All right, now let's pull this element out. Let's go to face project and project it. Oh, I didn't turn on my face projected onto the surface. Now, bring that in just a bit. Now what we can do is inset this about 0.02 and then inset a couple more times to create these details that we're about to create. 0.01. 0.1. And you can do this as many times as you want. If you want to actually add this detail, if you want to just use the texture for it, you can. This is just a detail that I was going to go with. Now, we can inset it completely up to here. Take these edge loops. Let's take a look at them. Actually, Actually, let's dissolve this edge loop. Take all those edge loops, bevel them. Go into face mode with all of these selected, extrude along faces. All right. Let's actually select the center face, increase our selection with the Control plus on the numpad, and raise this up a little bit higher. With that being done, extrude along normals on the center area. See how far back you can go. Now that we've done that, we're going to inset and bring it forward on the Y axis. We're going to do it one more time, inset, and then bring it forward on the Y axis. And control bevel, control B on that set of edge right there. And you could choose to actually have these edges have a bit of a bevel as well. And that's going to be sitting behind our camera lens. Let's go ahead and take this, press F. Let's go ahead and turn on our back face culling just to see what the normals look like. And it looks like the normals are correct. Now that we've created our glass piece, we can continue to move on. If you wanted to create an actual bulb, or the same as here where it's just kind of like a glass piece and you can add some emission to it, you're more than welcome to. You can do it any way that you were wanting to. If you wanted to add more details, more lights, anything specific, go for it. This is your detailing stage. And as we're at it, we also will need cables. Select this edge, Shift S, cursor is selected. Let's add in a cylinder. Rotate it by 90 degrees on the X axis. We're gonna decrease the radius and the depth. Now, here is where you get to decide what you want as far as your design goes. So, do you want to have two specific cables, one at the bottom, one at the top? What is the functionality of the first cable? It could be your power cable. The functionality of the second cable could be that it is just basically a video output cable. You can create a transformer box for it right here, where it supplies the power to it and anything like that. And we can go ahead and do that, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's go ahead and take our plugin area. Let's turn on our snapping and raise it up a bit. All right, turn off snapping, go into your face select, bring it back just a tad bit. Let's go ahead and inset and extrude along normals. If you wanted to, you can experiment bevels on the different parts. Let's go ahead and take this, duplicate it, and we're gonna have the port for our other function. Now you can make some changes to it if you really wanted to. Let's just extrude this out. You can actually take this and scale these out a bit. Make it a little bit larger. The power, this one could be video out. Once we make our changes, we'll have these two different items. We'll have what we can call the video out, and we can have our power, or vice versa, or however you want to design it, what you were thinking. So for now, what we're going to think about is, how is this camera going to be positioned? Is it going to be positioned upright straight? Where is it going to be sitting? Which part of the wall is it going to be sitting? What exactly is it securing? In other words, what is it watching? For me, what I'm going to actually be doing is selecting all of these faces and new elements that we've created. And we'll see where our rotation is going to be. So I wanted to rotate right here. Matter of fact, what we can actually do, select these faces and then these faces, Shift S, cursor to selected. Now add mesh and let's add in a cylinder. And let's rotate it on the y-axis by the 90 degrees. And bring our depth out. And let's see our radius where we're sitting at. Right there should be good. If you want to decrease it, again, it's up to you. Select these outer faces and scale them by the x-axis. All right, now select all of these new objects that we've created. Go over to Object, Set Origin to 3D Cursor. Now let's go ahead and rotate. As you can see, we've rotated along the pivot point that we've created, and the functionality works just the way we need it to. If you wanted to, you can actually go in, select this object, and then select the rest of the objects and rotate it along its axis as well for its rotational purpose. Now our camera is ready and we can create our cables. All right, so there's a few different ways that you can create the cables. The way that I like to do it is this way. I'll show you. So like I said, we're gonna imagine a transformer box, something that we're gonna create. So let's just take this specific back plate, Shift D, duplicate it, and let's move it over. Let's raise it up about right here. All right. So let's take our vertices and our edges and let's scale it on the x-axis. Now that we did that, let's check it out, make sure everything is good. So what we can actually do now is go to this specific object right here, for example. With this center face selected, press Shift S, cursor to selected. All right. Now let's add in a mesh, go over to single vert and add a single vert. And actually set the right. There we go. Our vert. Now extrude. All right, extrude again. Let's lower it down. Let's see where we need to go. Just pay attention to where your cable needs to go, how it needs to sit. All right. Down. Over. Touchdown right there. You can make some adjustments. For example, bring that over. Now, what we can actually do next, we can actually up over, is do the same thing for the other object. Select the center face. Look at it. Select the center face, Shift S, cursor to selected. We're gonna do the same thing. Add, mesh, single vert. And also, same thing as before, select this, Shift S, cursor to selected, and I'm gonna use the face as well, the face orientation, or otherwise the normals really. Select our vertice, go into edit mode, E to extrude it out a bit. All right, now extrude again, bring it over. Now let's go back into the global transformation orientation, drop this down a bit. Just make it to where it's kind of laying over this other cable. This up, this up. Bring that over to the right side. Now, let's actually set it up, bring it up to here. Now, a good way that we can actually kind of make sure that we're spacing them in the right places. So let's just take this guy right here. First, go to your backplate that you want it to be transferred over to. Go into face mode, select this face right here. Shift S, cursor to selected. All right, now select the port. Shift D to duplicate. Now that it's duplicated and it's selected, press Object, Set Origin to 3D Cursor. Now with that done, go back to Object, Set Origin, Geometry to Origin, and automatically it just flips it over and brings it over to the faceplate that we need in this, directly in the faceplate and centered. So now we just need to correct the rotation of it. So rotate it around just a bit, that's so. All right, now that we've got it rotated, all we need to do is align it perfectly to the back plate that we see here. So the way that we do that is turning on snapping, going into our align rotation to target, select the object and bring it over. And as you can see, it perfectly snaps it to it. Now we can just bring it over a bit. Let's make a accurate amount. Let's say 0.3. All right. Now we can do the same thing with this object. Shift D to duplicate it. Go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor, Object, Geometry to Origin. Again, turn off snapping, rotate, like so. Then turn on snapping again, bring it over. Now let's move it over to the right, minus 0.3, and we got our 2 ports. All right, so we are pretty close to finishing up. Now, off camera, I did make some small changes, very small incremental changes, nothing too big, like scaling this plate down by the Z-axis or scaling this one down by the X-axis. Very incremental stuff. It's just design changes that you can make yourself as well. Now, another thing that I did make a change in is the cables, because I did want them to be a little bit larger, just because of the fact that this does have to rotate, and so the cables do have to stretch out. So you have to keep those things in mind, and that's where the functionality comes into play. Now that we've set up our ports, what we need to do is connect the cables to it correctly. So what we can do is just view this object. Let's go into edit mode. All right, pull this vertex back, bring it out, bring this back a little bit, and have this kind of going in. Oh, make sure you line it up correctly. All right, once we have that set up, I'm actually going to subdivide this one more time and kind of fit it a little more loosely. Let's do the same thing on the other one. Select this edge, actually take this edge, subdivide it, take this vertice, lower it down a little bit. Now everything looks pretty centered. Now what we can do is kind of smooth out the wire, make it look like an actual cable. So the way that we do that is we can go into edit mode, select the vertex, and bevel it. And you can set the amount of bevels that you want. Go easy on it because you do want to still keep everything optimized. Same thing on the other wire. About 3, and with a good span, you should still have a good look to it. Now I did add a little bit extra on this one. However, just keep in mind you can keep it reduced because this is going to be a further away object as well. So you could have reduced the amount of vertices that we put in, but for now, this should be fine. Next, what we can actually do is select one of the wires, for example, this one, right click, convert to curve. Now, if we go into the curve panel or object data properties, we can actually go into the geometry tab, go over to the bevel and go into depth and increase your depth. Now we can make a lot of adjustments, as far as the port sizes and everything like that. I think that's a good amount. Now, as you can see right here, it's not exactly lined up. So this is where we can kind of set everything up. Go in edit mode, make your small adjustments. If you want to make it thinner, you can. It's really up to you. Actually, I will make mine about a bit smaller, and I'll fix the ports for it as well. Same thing here. Select, right click, convert to curve. Now we have these options. To the geometry tab, under bevel, give it some depth. Now I am going to make the power cable a little bit larger. About 0.07. So now, for the most part, we got our cable set up. Let's actually adjust this a bit. Get a bit of a smoother transition. There we go. Now let's make some small adjustments. For example, here. Now we're going to go into the port. Select it. We can actually delete this face. Select these set of faces. Right click, extrude along normals. Bring them in. Now we can actually delete these. Go in an edge loop. Select that row of faces right here on the outer edge. Extrude along normals. All right. And do the same thing here. We can dissolve this and this because they do not serve any kind of purpose, and they're just adding more faces. Now go back into this object, which is our cable. Put this down. Position it into place. We'll be doing the same thing on the actual camera as well. Delete that face. Do it along normals. I'm actually going to make it a little bit different. Just like so. Well, actually grab this set of edges, GG, bring them in. Extrude along normals. And I'm going to bevel this by 1 segment. Now, going back into the power port. Let's adjust the cable itself. One way you could do this is with proportional editing. And you can increase it with the page up and down. Perfect. Now go back into this object, delete the faces. Delete our faces. Select this row, do it along and dissolve this edge. We'll do the same thing here on the actual camera itself. Now I'm going to actually select these set of faces and extrude along normals. So one thing I actually forgot to mention to you, you can actually use something called the cavity map. It is in Blender. You go up to the very top right corner and select cavity. And you can choose between the screen type or the world or both. For this, we're gonna go with both. It really highlights your edges. All right, so for the most part, we are done with the main object. We've created the lens. We have created the covering, the actual camera. We've created a lot of the details. A couple other things that you can actually add are little screws here and there just to add more into the object. Select this face in this very center. Shift S, cursor to selected. And let's add a cylinder. We're gonna have 22 edges, 22 vertices. Obviously, we're gonna bring down the radius and the depth. Let's take a look at it real quick. You can actually still move it around and still adjust everything you need. All right. Let's rotate it a bit. Now, like before, what we can actually do is move it over. Turn on our snapping. Go to align rotation to target and align it to it. We'll actually have to pull this out, turn this back on, and snap it to the actual surface. Make sure you mess around with your transform orientations to get the right orientation and set up pretty much where you want this object to be. So about right here. All right, select the face, turn off snapping and proportional editing, and bring it in. Let's actually make it a bit smaller. Let's make it a bit smaller. About right there. All right. Again, make sure we're snap to the surface. All right, so from here, you can decide whether or not you want to keep this as a flat object and add maybe just a bit of a bevel to it. That way later on you can go into your texturing software or even using Blender to stamp on a decal, a normal map decal, to create the screw. If you didn't want to do that and you wanted to kind of create it yourself, you do have a couple of options. And here's one. Let's take this vertex and this vertex. Let's connect it. This vert, and connect this. Same thing here. And the same thing here. Now go to the very middle one. Let's delete those faces. Select these two edges and bridge them together. Select these two, bridge. And the same thing here. And now we have a screw detail. And we can also add a bevel modifier, or you can actually take it into sub D, whichever one that you wanted to go with. Now what we need to actually do now is mirror it along the Y, and we can choose the eyedropper and select the object. It's going to be along the X axis. Now you can actually go in and apply it. Go to this specific object, press L for linked, and make sure you have the correct face orientation, and let's just rotate it a bit. Now there's many different ways that you can do that. You can have them going all the way around. Now we do have this here, but there's different ways to do it. So with those screws being created, you can also use them to fill out the rest of your scene as well. So let's add some screws here, and let's add some bolts right there. Matter of fact, we'll just create some bolts for this area. Select this top face. Shift S, cursor to selected. Now, let's add a plane. Now let's rotate it minus 90 degrees. So it is facing us and we have the perfect normals. Let's scale it down. Turn on the proper global orientation. Bring it down a bit and make it a bit larger. Make it about this big. All right, now we can select the face and we can subdivide it. With it being subdivided, we go to Loop Tools and we press Circle. Now let's bring it over. Now we can select the faces that we have, extrude along normals. And then from here, you can do many different things. You can select the same faces that we have, extrude them again, and then extrude them outwards. There's many different methods to it. Or you can just throw in a basic bevel. And now what you can actually do, just like before, you can actually mirror it along the X. And then you can apply this. You can apply it and mirror it along the Z axis by using the eyedropper and selecting our backplate. Now, the entirety of our details are over with, and you can do the same exact things with this. You can add knobs, you can adjustments, you can add screws where you can tighten them up depending on how tightly you want the camera to be able to roll back and forth. There's a lot of different options that you have here. Now let's take it to shade smoothing so we see what our shading looks like. So, for example, we can actually take our cover here. Right click and go to shade smooth. Now you can go to auto smooth and you can actually adjust the amount of smoothing that you have. Go to 35. You can go all the way out. Now on an object like this, the smoothing is not going to change much, but on other objects you'll see a lot of different changes. So for now, let's just stick to 35%. Go to something like this. Let's go ahead and shade smooth it. 35%. Now what if we do at 60? As you can see, we have more smoothing and more overriding of those normals right here. Stick to 35. Same thing here. 35. And with the same thing with the curves. Ultimately, once you are finished with your curve, right click, go to convert to, and convert it to a mesh. Also, right click, shade smooth, 35%. Right click, shade smooth, 35%. Now, it looks like we're at mostly done. You can take a look at your object in many different angles. You can look at it through matte cap. Go at the very top right corner, right click, and select a different colors that you might have, or you can just stick to studio and take a look at your object. Now, as I said before, we're not going to go into the texturing. We're going into more fundamental modeling and teaching you how to create these different objects. But what I will be showing you is how to take your objects, a couple of your objects, into high poly, and how you can do all your baking and everything yourself. So let's select something like this. All right. Now, let's go ahead and name it. Let's keep everything organized. It's going to be cam cover. Now what we can do is Shift D to duplicate it, and it's going to automatically press .001. We're going to cover that to cam cover high. Now that we have this, we have both visible, we can actually hide the original cam cover. Now what you can actually do is put in our support loops. The way we do that, as before, select all of these edges, Alt, left click, on the flow of edges or on the flow of faces that you see, and inset. And you'll have yourself a perfect amount of inset. All right, once we're happy with that, we know that we're gonna need some blue cuts here, inset here. Now you see it actually deformed the mesh for a second, and we can fix that with just edge railing it. Or seeing what offset even does for us. Same thing here. And here. Go ahead and go through and add in all your support loops. So we can select these objects and inset to maintain that shape. Take a look around at your object, make sure everything is correct. All right, so now we can actually go into our modifier tab and apply a subdivision surface modifier. And the reason why we do that is because it creates a perfect beveling of the object, even the beveling that the bevel modifier can't do. And that's me saying that personally. A lot may think differently and use it a lot better. As you can see, we'll have that perfect amount of bevel because everything in the real world doesn't have a perfect knife cut edge. And the whole purpose of this is to maintain the shape that we have for the low poly, which is the other object that we have. So make sure that everything looks exactly how it should. And it maintains the shape that we created. Or it maintains the silhouette, as we would call it. And you can apply these same fundamental steps into all the other objects that you have. Once you've created the cover and you created the high poly of the object, what you can do just to keep everything organized, right click, go to move to collection, and create a new collection called high poly. Press OK, and now it is automatically set here. So once you go through and convert each one into an high poly and bring it over, then you can join all of the objects together. Another thing you can ultimately do, just to make it a little bit simpler with smaller objects like screws, bolts, nuts, everything, things like that, you can actually just take it through a bevel modifier. So a good thing you can do is select all of these different edges that you want to have a slight bevel to. Once we have them selected, we can right click, go to edge bevel weight, and increase or decrease the amount that you want. You can actually do it with this slider on the bottom left corner of the screen. Now we can go into the bevel modifier. We can go from angle to weight. And we can increase how much of a bevel we want. And we have our bevel. And the screw is done. Now, a quick tip as you're creating your low polys. If you remember correctly, we could actually go in, select every single other set of edges if we did this correctly, and we can actually dissolve them. That way we maintain the silhouette that we created and yet still be able to get a really good bake and keep everything optimized and looking good. So any unwanted edges that you see, you can actually remove. For example, something like this, a good thing you can do is you can actually take off this cut that we made. We actually don't need this. Why? Because we can use the high poly as the baked normal to create this effect for us. And bridge those as well. And you can do the same thing with this right here. So if you select these two objects and hide them, take this, increase the selection with Control plus button, delete. Let's take this object and this object and press Control J. Now that we have everything joined, make sure that there's no interfaces and remove any extra edges or edge loops that you may have. Dissolve them. Now go to your bordering edges. So these right here and this, and bridge the edge loops. And automatically we've dissolved most of the edge loops that we actually don't need. Go through your object to make sure everything is corrected, and you should be good. Now, if you were wondering how to take something like this into a high poly state, there's a lot of different options that you have, just like insetting most of the outer edges or throwing in loop cuts like so and on the outer edges. And then what you can do is select this face and inset by a certain amount and then inset again and then scale it down. And you'll be able to take it to a high poly subdivision surface. Once you've completed all of your low poly and your high poly, what you can actually do is select all of your objects and Control J. And make sure that you don't have any custom split normal data. Go to 35%. We are done. Ultimately, if you did want to create separation between all of your objects for your material IDs, there's many different things you can do. You can simply go into the entire thing, create a new material, like this main material, which is going to be the entire thing, and assign it to it. Deselect, select. Once you press the plus button, you'll create a new material. Select the lens itself, select the second material, and assign it to it. And create a new material for it and call it lens. Or what I personally like to do is vertex color. So for example, if we were to take this specific object, press L to link it, which is the cover of the actual camera, I can go into vertex paint. Then I can select paint mask. I can select a color like green, go over to paint, set vertex colors. And once we bake everything out, it'll automatically be baked out onto my objects and I'll have material separation. Anyways, guys, that just about covers everything. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope it does actually help you out. It is very simple, but these fundamental tools will help you model just about anything that you can think of. In future videos, we will be covering high poly. We will cover deeper into the high poly subdivision surface modifier. We will also go into baking, and then ultimately we can go into texturing. Anyways, thank you guys.